Hello, my friends. Today's quilt project is a king size quilt where we'll make several blocks. And it's a wonderful project that my heart is really in because it is for a newlywed couple who is just beginning a new chapter of their life together. One of them spends days helping people smile as a dentist, while the other works long hours as a detective, solving mysteries and protecting the community. And when they finally get time together, they both relax and listen to smooth jazz music. So for this quilt, I wanted to create something comforting, timeless, and full of movement, almost like jazz itself. We'll be combining classic quilt blocks with beautiful fabrics and flowing designs to create a king-size quilt they can treasure for years to come. So in this video, I'm going to take you step by step through the process as we sew flying geese, snowball blocks, and pinwheel blocks together into one large quilt full of personality and love. Whether you're making a wedding quilt, a memory quilt, or simply looking for inspiration for your next big quilting project, I hope this video gives you plenty of ideas and encouragement. So today we're working with our Bella Solids from Moda, and we're going to be opening these 5-inch charm packs and creating them into half square triangles. So I'm really excited about getting these made to put them into the package. So we're going to be taking each one, turning it onto the back using our ruler. Now, since we're using 5-inch charm packs, we want to make sure that our ruler is at least a corner to corner 7-inch. So really an 8-inch or longer ruler. We're going to put it point to point, and we're going to draw on it because that's going to be our cut line. Okay, so we've put right sides together. We've put our pins in to make our half square triangles. Now we're going to take a ruler. We're doing 5-inch squares, so we want to make sure our ruler is at least 8 inches long so it can go corner to corner. We're going to be cutting on that line. We're going to be sewing a 1/4 inch on this side, turning it around and sewing a 1/4 inch on this side. So we are going to go ahead and complete this entire stack. And then we are going to start sewing. And make sure when you're looking at your 5-inch squares that you're putting it right from corner to corner. So if you're not marking exactly at the edge, you've got the ruler pulled out to where your mark is going directly corner to corner. So it's a little bit of a process, but once you start sewing, it goes so quick and it's so fun. So this is a great way to just relax, drink your tea, mark up your blocks, and then when you start sewing, you can sew all of these at one time and feel so productive. And for our blue blocks, we have used a lighter pencil. This is a quilter's pencil. It is a Prismacolor by Barrel. So I'm using that on the back side of my fabric, made my marks on all of these, and now I'm going to be matching them together with their moda. And we have them face up on this stack. So I'm just going to take one from the top of the stack, lay it down, match my corner to corner exactly on my block. And then we're going to place a couple of pins in here so they don't move. And we are going to throw them in the stack and go on to the next, and we'll do this for the entire stack. So we are getting ready to do our half square triangles. We're going to be making pinwheels today, so I'm so excited. I cannot wait to share the pinwheels with you. And what I like to do is iron my pieces flat. I have my steam iron with the cotton setting, and I'm just gonna lock those stitches in by steaming them. And we can see that even though I lined these up perfectly, we've got some showing. So again, no square is cut perfect. A 5" on my cutting blade is different from a 5" cutting blade on somebody else. So when you start a project, it's good to use the same ruler, the same cutting method on all of your blocks. That way you run a better chance of getting a more even quilt. Because look at this, I'm off over here. These could have been lined up maybe a little bit perfect, but I'm seeing it both on this side. And this side, I still see my white. So again, when you cut, use the same cutting blade, use the same scissors, use the same ruler, use the same technique throughout your entire project. And that way you run a better chance of having your blocks more uniform in size. And it's okay to throw a couple of these on top of each other to press them. It's not necessary to move them each time because that steam goes through them. But ideally, before you pick these up and do anything else with them, it would be nice to let them cool. If you let them cool before you pick them up, they are going to be much more uniform and pressed than, see, if we pick it up or we bend it, it's going to stay bent because right now it's got the steam in it. So just make sure when you pick them up, they are staying perfectly flat, going to a perfectly flat group. Ideally, again, let them cool before the next process. Okay, and I will meet you at the cutting board in about 5-10 minutes after I think these have cooled off enough. Okay, and our squares have cooled. So now that we've locked in the stitches from the iron, I'm going to put my ruler right on the marked line, and I'm going to cut these in half, and then we'll go back to the iron and press them open. And just take time to make sure that your ruler is right on that line, straight from point to point, so that you have even seams on both sides for both blocks, even seams. Because those 1/4" seams, the more uniform you have them, the better your finished product is going to be, because everything is going to line up better. You're not going to have to worry about anything torquing, pulling, being uneven. Now, notice how I'm cutting as well. With the rotary blade, if you are cutting your blocks straight up and down, that blade is going to be closer to the ruler and you're going to be straight up and down. Don't go at an angle, don't go at an angle. If you go out at an angle here, you're not following your ruler as precise. So make sure that your wrist, that your ruler, that your rotary cutter is straight up and down and touching that ruler as you go across. Straight up and down. If you bend your wrist and this ruler is at an angle, you're not cutting straight. You have to be perfectly up and down from what you're cutting to get the best, truest cut, truest line, straight line. Takes a little bit of practice, but once you are practiced, it is easy to maintain that because your it's kind of like muscle memory. And notice that I start right before my fabric and I end after my fabric. kind of like they say when you're throwing a football or a ball, keep your follow through. I keep my follow through on the blade as well. So I'm starting prior to my fabric, I'm ending after my fabric. Those are some good cutting techniques to keep in mind. And I will meet you back at the iron. So when we're pressing these open, I'm just going to grab a hold of the black. We're going to grab a hold of the black side and open it up, and that way our seams are going to go towards the black. All right, let me do that again. We're grabbing a hold of the black, pulling it up slightly, and just moving the iron straight back over it. So we're throwing our piece out. And we're going to do this to the entire stack. And again, we're throwing our block out, lifting our black part, our darker side, and we're just pressing it back. And that way, when we do that on the back side, the seams are towards the darker color, so they're not going to be showing through our white when we go to put it on the long arm and finish the quilt. A quilt that has white, ideally all of the seams should go towards the darker side, and that way you're not seeing through the white onto the darker piece to catch your eye on the final quilt. All right, I'm going to press the rest of these and I will meet you at the sewing machine. So our blocks are pressed, and now I want to lay them out and start sewing them together. And we're going to do them in the shape of a pinwheel. And that means all of their points come to the center. So here is my center. All of the points are coming in, and I have kind of that spiral look. Now, if I look at these, they're kind of all dots or all the same decoration because 2 blocks cut in half equals 1. So we're going to switch these colors out just a little bit so I don't have the same piece side by side because the whites are white on white tone. Okay, so that first block or 2 mixed up should mix up most of the others. And now I can go ahead and sew these together. I got them all coming together in the center. So I'm going to take these and I'm going to fold them in half. And I'm going to, you can pin them, but since I'm immediately sewing them, I'm going to sew them together, and then we will sew the next set and the next set, and I'm going to chain stitch them on the machine. So we're going to come over to our stack. We're going to take the top 2 in one pile, lay them together, black into white, white into black. We're going to match up their seams to where they're laying into one another, and then we're going to sew straight down that line. And we're going to match another 2, and we're going to chain stitch all of the bottoms to all of the tops, matching in those 2 seams so we're lined up, and sewing our 1/4 inch. Now our 1/4 inch on this foot is, see how it goes over and then there's a ridge right before that point? That's our 1/4 inch between the center and right here at the point. Now you can go through all of these and pin them together ahead of time, but I find it convenient just sitting at the sewing machine and matching them individually as I go along. And you can feel those two ridges as they go together to know that they are matched. And I have white thread in my bobbin and white thread in my top thread. It is the same thread that keeps your tension straight if you use the same thread in your bobbin that you're using in the top. So make sure if you jump from different weights of thread, or you jump from polyester to cotton to some kind of blend, make sure that your bobbin thread is always the same thread that is in your top spool. And now we're grabbing from the top stack, so we're still lining up our seams. So we're grabbing from the top stack now, taking one from each pile, laying them together, coming around, making sure our seams are matching, nesting real well together. Oopsie. Let's open that back up, make sure I got it right. And I have it right. When in doubt, open it up and check. You do not want to sew these together incorrectly. That would be sad. That would be another opportunity for Mr. Seam Ripper to come out. And we're going to continue chain stitching till we have all of these done. Now, if you have been chain stitching all of your blocks together, you can grab a hold of your blocks and pull them and cut them on the thread cutter on the side of your machine, because again, when you chain stitch, you only have a tiny piece of thread in between the two, and you can just pop it right through on your sewing machine. That's going to save you lots of time at the cutting board or at the ironing table. So go ahead and use that thread cutter on the side of your machine. And we're back at our iron with our stack of blocks where we have two sewn together. So we're only half of our pinwheel block, but we're going to take these and we're going to press our seams towards the dark side. Okay, so we're just going to take our iron on our cotton setting. Make sure you don't mess that white one back up. And we want all of our seams pressing towards the dark side. All right, so I messed that one up a little bit, but now he's perfect. So let me show you that again. Now see how the seams are all towards the dark side on all of these. So you see the line, the seams through that with the light behind it? That's how we want to do all of our blocks. So let's grab another one. We're going to turn her upside down. See how this and this, we want it all laying the proper way. So we're going to take our iron and press it down to keep our seams going the correct direction. All right, and I'm going to press all of these, and then I'm going to meet you back over at the, let's go to the cutting board, and we're going to snip off these corners, and then I'll meet you at the sewing table after that. All right, so I'll show you that again. We are pressing down the white, keeping it towards the black, pressing down the black, and then we're twisting the iron so it keeps this seam going towards the black as well. Okay, so let me show you that one more time. We are pressing our half pinwheel blocks together. So this is half of our pinwheel. We're going to the back of it. Now we always want our seams going towards the black. So this is going towards the black. We come up here. We're going to press that center seam over, and then I'm going to twist the iron down, keeping that white seam going towards the black. And it's not hard, but it's not the simplest thing to do either. You've got to really do that. Then we're going to take it over to the cutting board. I'm going to trim off the bulk here and all of my ends, so that I don't have them coming up and being extra bulk when I sew them to other pieces. Okay, one more. So I find it easier putting it towards me here. So this seam is going up, I'm going to press up. This seam needs to go towards the black, so I'm going to press it over. And then I'm going to turn my iron to keep this white seam coming down. Okay, see how that looks? Beautiful. And then I might just pick up and down my iron a couple of times, splatting that down. And then we have all of our seams going the correct directions. There we go. Now, I'm picking them up while they're still hot. I should not be doing that. What I should be doing is letting them cool off before I move them, because every time you move a hot block that's had steam hit to it, you're liable to make it not as flat, because if you bend it in the process, it's going to hold that bend because it's hot and steamy. So if I let this wait till it's perfectly dry and cold, it's going to be a more perfect, more flat block. But as it is, I'm going to be ironing this piece after every block is added to it. So it's going to go under my iron quite a few more times. So up, whoopsie. So I'm going to go up, over, twist it down, keep that white there, and then I'm going to pop that top corner down a little bit more because it's thicker, needs an extra little bit of coaxing, and we are beautiful. All right, so now we're just going to cut off some of the corners so that we don't have them in the way of combining them further. So we're going to take each piece, turn them over, and this we should have done prior to putting it together. Let's see if I can move the ruler out of the way. And we're just going to knock off each of the ends that sticks up or in the way. Set them aside. And yes, you can take your ruler and lay it down and be much more precise. So if we're going to be precise, we're going to put it across the top, and we will knock off our corners as such. So you've got one on the side, one on the top, and then this back one. And then you're so much more straight. Now look at this piece. This piece was sewn incorrectly. And how do I know that? Because it bows, it doesn't line up. So if we're putting the piece on it, we're seeing how it bows up on the top, and on the bottom, we're leaving a gap. So we need our seam ripper. Take that out because that's not a true 1/4 inch seam. About halfway through, we came in too low. So we want to do our seam ripper and redo that at a good 1/4 inch, because that being off a slight here and off a slight here, we're off a 1/4 inch on that block, and that's not good. That's not good. So we're going to fix that one. This one, see, you can tell it is straight. So we're just going to knock off the ends. And I'll meet you back at the sewing table. It may not seem like a lot, but cutting all of these ends off is eliminating unnecessary bulk from our project. And hey, we've got some really fun scrappy pieces to play with. So I'm going to keep all of that, whether we use it for stuffing or something else. That's good to use. Make sure you always close the rotary blade. Okay, so let's take it off, see what we've got. We have our perfect pinwheel. We've couched our seams. They're all meeting very nicely in the center here. And that looks like a perfect pinwheel. Very happy with that. So let's continue and do the rest of the stack, shall we? So we're taking our 2 pieces, laying them out in the shape of our pinwheel, and then folding them together. We're going to couch them in the center. We want those lines perfectly aligned, so they're all together right there. I'm going to hold that piece, and we are going to stitch across. Now again, if you weren't immediately sewing, you'd want to use some pins so that you keep everything perfectly aligned. Now you are going over a lot of seams right in the middle, so it's very important you keep everything perfectly aligned and pushed one side to the other. We have this towards the black, we have this towards the black, so we lay it up, we line it up, make sure our seams are perfect right there in the center, and we sew it across. See how I'm keeping my finger right there until we stitch across, so it's perfectly aligned. All right, and we grab our next one. Same way. Open it up. Sure we all meet right in the center. That one looks like it's off. We're meeting right in the center. And we're going to stitch it across. of this color. Slow and steady wins the race, my friends. Okay, so we have sewn this together and it's come out to where it's not matched in the center. What do? We know we have to adjust this over to where this is directly in the center, and then we can put it with the rest of our blocks. So we need to take our handy dandy little seam ripper and start pulling stitches, or we can look at this beautiful thing that I just picked up at the quilt show that we just went to in Paducah. I'm so excited about this. This is a snip and rip seam ripper, and it is an electronic seam ripper. And let's see if we can open it here. It did cost me $20.99. I purchased this from the Lone Star Quilt Shop. They were the only ones in the show with this, my friends. So I'm very excited. And I'm wondering, aha, I see a battery. So Wonder Away, the battery comes with it. So excited about that because I hadn't planned to purchase a battery and I need my seam ripper now. So let's open up this plastic casing, and it looks like it comes with a nice little brush to brush away my pieces of seams after I do this. So let's see how we install the battery. Very, very easy installation. Looks like the AA battery. And I'm going to turn this on. It's a little vibrating gypsy. Look at that, just like you would clean or trim your beard or anything else. And we're going to take it and see how it does on my seam ripping. Now, I've never done this before, so bear with me, but I'm going to turn that on, and I know I need to open my seam here. So let's see how to get this started. Maybe I should read instructions. Oh my goodness. Okay. And if I can get my hands on this, looks like you need almost 3 pair of hands like you always do seam ripping. Look at this. Easy peasy. I'm just opening it up and literally shaving these threads away. Now, I did have this on a tight 1.5, so I was not looking forward to using the seam ripper on this piece and really debating how accurate I wanted these blocks, but you know, it's not met in the center. I really just need to do this. So and I'm being really careful about this because I'm nervous about wrecking my fabric. I don't have extra fabric of these blocks. So I'm going slow, but oh my gosh, I am done in that quick. So let's take their handy dandy little brush and just brush out these rest of my pieces of thread so I can restitch it without having a lot of mess here. I am really excited. Did you see how fast that went? And yeah, the brush works, but I might just pull these out with my fingernail. Wow. I want to do that again. So, hey, I might just screw up another block so I can use my handy dandy new tool. And there's my thread. All right, cleaned up nice and neat. So let's go ahead and re-sew that piece. Wow, that was amazing. I like this. It's called the Gypsy Quilter Snip and Rip Seam Ripper. Quickly and efficiently removes unwanted stitching. I am really excited. It feels good. It fits your hand real nice. Easy on, off button. Amazing. This is cool. So let's sew these two pieces back together, and then maybe we'll come back and talk about that seam ripper another minute. That I was Wow, that's really cool. So let's shake the little fuzzes out of here, come back over to the sewing machine, and let's sew these back together, paying attention, keeping my seams aligned this time. So we're doing the block. Okay, making sure my seams are aligned. I really, really like that seam ripper. That was amazing. Okay, so now my seams are being held in the right spot by my finger. I'm not going to remove that finger until I've sewn past that spot. My threads wanted to go backwards. Okay. All right, now let's see if I have sewn it. Oh, so much better. Look at that center. Look at that center, spot on. Now, I can use my lint roller and clean up the rest of this, so that's not an issue. I always have a lint roller handy when I'm sewing anyway. I am extremely pleased with this. And my friends, I just want to tell you that although I get nothing from the quilt shop for saying this, I am an Amazon affiliate. So some links in this video are affiliate links, which means I may earn a small commission at no extra cost to you. You'll see them in the description, and I do earn from qualifying purchases, and this helps support my channel and allows me to continue great new quilting gadgets and tools and keep making very cool quilts for you. And by the way, I've got several quilts planned, and hopefully you've seen my haul videos where I got a lot of fabric, so several more tutorials coming up soon. And let's get back to the quilt project. I am so excited about this. All right, so now we're going to start on our blue and our black ones. So we've got our line across. We're going to put our foot down. We're going to sew a 1/4 inch on either side to make our half square triangles. And I've switched my thread. Since I have black and blue, I'm using blue thread in the bobbin, blue thread in the top. And we're just going to do a stack of these, chain stitching them together. And remember, accuracy matters, so don't take your finger off to grab the next block. Make sure you sew all the way through. It will turn and move at the end if you're not holding on to it. If you have the ability on your sewing machine, always have it in the foot down position so that if you stop sewing at any time, your needle is going to be needle down position. Your needle is going to be down in the fabric, holding your fabric where it is so it's not going to move. Now on these tiny blocks, it doesn't matter, but when you're working on larger pieces, adding them together, it helps it from pulling and torquing with the weight of the fabric. So it's a really good habit to get into, to always have the needle down position. When you're picking up the next stack from the pile, I find it easiest to just pick it up by the pin. That way you know you're only getting the 2 blocks and they come up nice and even. When we do a bunch of these, then we're going to turn the stack around. So bring the whole stack in front of you, let it drop down, and then you're going to sew a 1/4 inch on the opposite side. Chain stitching helps save thread, but to me, more than saving thread, you're saving the hassle of all those little strings you have to clip off. You're simply cutting between the 2 blocks and you're done. No threads to then snip off at each piece. And we ran out of thread, so let's get us some more thread on there. Measure twice, make sure your fingers are back away from the blade, make sure that the rotary cutter is straight up and down. Start before the block, end after the block, and separate your pieces. That gives you more accurate trimming. Your ruler is longer than the block. Your rotary blade is straight up and down. You press down onto the rotary mat with the blade prior to starting your cut and ending after your fabric. Lay out your block. Make sure your ruler is longer than your block is catty corner across. Measure it. Keep your fingers back. Blades straight up and down. Start on the cutting mat before your block. End on the cutting mat after your block. Okay, so I've pressed all of the blocks, and now I'm going to go ahead and stack them the way that I need to sew them so that I can just pick them up and go with it. So if I have them like this, we have that pinwheel effect with all the points coming together in the center. And if I turn it over, I'm looking at the exact same thing. So I know I can stack them all here and they're all going to fit. So I'm going to stack them up and then we are going to sew them together. Okay, so now I have them all stacked together. I'm going to take the two, lay them together, and we are going to sew them up. Now, since I pushed all of the seams towards the black, my seams should nest perfectly. So I want them to line up, come together, and this is where I am going to sew. All right, let's do one more together. Lay them together. Come over to my seam. Make sure my seams are perfectly aligning. And then bring you over to the sewing machine and sew these together. And I'm going to chain stitch this entire pile together. And as I sew, I'm matching them up, making sure their seams nest together. You can kind of feel it in your fingers that one seam is going one direction, the other is going the other, and they really feel good together like they match. And now I'm going to select two of my fabrics. I'm going to take this beautiful jazz fabric, cut it into 10-inch squares, and then I'm going to take this blendable and I'm going to cut it into 5 1/4-inch squares. So we're going to make flying geese next. 10-inch squares, 5 1/4-inch squares. This fabric I believe is Grunge by Moda. And this fabric here, I will try and find a selvage and let you know. This fabric is High Fashion Fabrics with the beautiful jazz fabric on it. And these are some of the other colors that I'm looking to use on this quilt. Just picked them up from Paducah's, Hancock's of Paducah. So I'm very excited about putting this quilt together. Let's get started. And accuracy, my friends, requires flat fabric. So we're at the ironing board. We're going to press all of our fabrics flat. We thought they were flat enough before we cut them with no wrinkles, but the edges turned up requires an extra little bit of pressing. So we're going to press these and we will meet you back at the sewing machine. And since the iron is hot, let's go ahead and catch up with our pieces here. We're always going to press the seams towards the darker color. We're going to use it on the hot cotton setting, as this is 100% cotton, quilters cotton fabric. And then we'll go over to the cutting board. We'll trim off our little corners and sew these together into the beautiful pinwheel shape. Just open them up, down, across, and steam it flat. Just make sure that steam doesn't bite you back. And if we're always pressing the same way, our seams are going to meld really well. So you want to make sure you're always pressing towards the black. And that way when you put it together, your pieces are black, blue, or, you know, the darkest of your color. Always press towards the same color. And that way your seams are all going to line up and meld together well. And trim all of your corners off of your fabric to where you have no more tails. All right, so now we have our 10-inch blocks, our 5 1/4 inch pieces to match. We're going to put them right sides together. We're going to line them up right in the corners. And once I have them in the corners, I'm going to take my pins and I'm going to pin each of these blocks. We are going to make 4 flying geese at one time. So I have us pinned. Now I'm going to take a ruler. Now the ruler that you take, remember this is a 10-inch square. So our 10 inches, we need at least 15 inches as a ruler to draw point to point. Now this point to point line is going to be our cutting line. So I can use permanent ink on this because it's our cutting line. We're going to sew 1/4 inch on that side and 1/4 inch on this side. I'm going to sew the rest of our half square triangles in blue and black together. Now these started as 5-inch squares, and we're sewing 1/4 inch seams, sewing them together in 4 pieces, or I guess that's actually technically 8 pieces now to make one block. Because we're sewing 4 half square triangles together. And we're making sure that they nest. So we're taking our seams, lining them up, squishing them together so it kind of forms a V at the top. And you know your seams are laying together, you can feel them there. And then we're stitching our 1/4 inch seam. Now we're going to take our 10-inch block with the 5 1/4 on it, the drawn line, and we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch on each side. So let's move it over to the sewing machine. We're going to line it up, and the point of this foot, there's a little place right here on the metal with a groove. That is our 1/4 inch between the needle and that line. So we're going to try and keep that right there as we stitch across. And I changed the thread to be the same color as the fabric. And we're going to make sure this point stays where it belongs as we get closer to it. Now I don't pull this out or cut my thread. I lift my foot, I pull my fabric around to the front, and I do it on the opposite side. I stitch down my 1/4 inch the opposite side. Okay, and now I'm going to pull it out, cut my threads, and pull our pins out. I'm going to use a hot iron to lock in my stitches. Just hit that with a bit of heat, let it cool, and then take it over to the cutting board. And I'm going to take a ruler that is, since this is a 10-inch block, turned on point. I'm going to need about 14 inches, but I like to start my rotary blade before it and after it, so I want at least a 15-inch ruler. And I'm going to line it up on my previous drawn line, point to point, and we're going to cut on that line, close up my blade, and now we're going to go back to the iron and press our blocks open. Now we're back on the ironing board, and I'm going to take my first block, press it open, my second block, press it open, and we're going to move over to the other one, letting the first one cool. And with a hot iron on the hottest cotton setting, because I'm using 100% cotton fabric, we're pressing this next one open. Now that, I think, looks like a heart, but it's going to be our flying geese. So let's take this back over to the cutting board. Here on the cutting board, I have my 5 1/4 inch squares. That one looks like it needs to be hit again with the iron. And we're going to take them face sides together, meaning face side down, because the other one is face up. And I'm going to lay it on there. And let's go ahead and pin it. And we'll pin it once, do our ruler, and then pin it a second time. And we're going point to point. So I'm taking my permanent marker, permanent pin, because I am cutting on this line. We're drawing my line and then putting my pin in here, setting it aside, doing the second one identical. Measure twice, draw once, and putting our other pin in, and I will meet you at the sewing machine. We have our beautiful piece, and now we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch on either side of this line. So I'm going to line it up. Now you want to keep your fingers on it all the way through so it doesn't move, and you keep a straight line. Lift your foot, pull it around to the front, pull out a little more thread if you need it, set it back down with that point right on that line where that groove is. It's just inside of that point. Okay, and that one's done. If you want, you can chain stitch the second one as well. Trim your threads. We have our 2 blocks. Pull your pins from the blocks. I'm going to hit them with a hot iron. and just locking down those seams. Then let your blocks cool, and I'll meet you at the cutting board. Okay, and our fabric has cooled. Now, why do I want it to cool after I iron it? Because if it's hot, if it's moist, and I bend it or fold it or put something on top of it, it can leave a crease. If I let it cool, more chances are it stays perfectly flat. So we have our block, and it just doesn't look like a block, does it? So let's take our ruler again, and we're going to place it on it. We're going to cut on our previous mark. And we're going to cut on our previous mark. And now we're going to go back over with these 4 pieces to the ironing board. We're back on our ironing board. And we've got our hot iron. I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to lay the iron down on the open piece and just push back that closed piece. And now, my friends, I have a large flying geese, and my hope was to have it the same size as my other blocks. And once I trim them down, I will have them the same size so they fit in the quilt nicely. So very excited about that. And let's go ahead and press the second one. And I'm going to lay my iron down on the open one, press that closed one to open position, and then see how I have my flying geese. Let me do a couple more of these, and that way you can understand it a little bit better. And flying geese are triangles that you can do all kind of fun things with in different sizes. And let me lay these out to where they're all running together. You'll understand them better once I trim them and put them in a quilt. But see how you kind of get that they're flying geese flying in a row. Now, I made these large because I wanted them to be the same size as my blocks. So I'm very excited about this, and I wanted to use a pattern that really shows through even with the corners dubbed off. Now, what can you do with flying geese? I would do it differently if I wanted to make squares out of it. But again, you can make all kind of things. We can match this in the center and have the geese flying out from either side. Lots of different options here. I hope you've enjoyed this process. I'm going to go make about 40 more. Watch that hand, what it picks up. We are marking our blocks. We are not cutting our blocks at the moment. Ooh. And make sure you always have your right sides facing each other. This is the right side. This is the right side. We're putting it face to face. Line it up nicely with your block. Pin it so it does not move. Make your mark. Do this for all of them that you've cut that you're making flying geese for. Now, how many flying geese do I want in the quilt? I honestly can't tell you that, my friends, until I have finished with my quilt, because I'm looking to make it a king size, but I'm not following a pattern. I'm creating my own masterpiece. So I will try to let you know when I have finished. I'll calculate up how much fabric I used and do that. But as I'm going, I'm creating my own masterpiece, artwork, if you will, in a quilt form. So I don't know exactly how. Oh man, watch yourself at the end. I have pulled the pin up both times because the fabric moved on me. So be very careful with that. Accuracy matters in every step. Accuracy in the correct sizes, accuracy in pressing, accuracy in measuring, drawing, and doing the like. If you're having trouble with all the pieces staying straight, consider after you've made your mark, leave your ruler on it, and then barely pick up your piece to get one finger underneath to place your pen, and then place your other pen on the top before removing your ruler. You can even switch it to the other side after the needle, so you're just holding down a point. Even put a weight on it if you like, to then pen the other side. And that's going to help your fabric from moving. And again, I'm just lifting it high enough to get my finger under to put a pin in it. And then I'm flattening it back out, making sure I'm level. Now, when you're drawing your mark across and you put your blocks down, make sure you have it right at the edge of that fabric. So both fabrics are right plumb together. And then do the other side. Make sure they are plumb together. And then I want you to take your ruler. And when you have your ruler, line it up from corner to corner to corner. So you've got your point just there. And then I want you to start on one side and just make the mark out. Start on the other side, make your mark out, and then gently do the top of it. That way when you get to the end, you're not veering off any direction and you're smooth on both sides. So again, I have my ruler there. I'm just lifting it enough to get one finger underneath to comfortably put my pins in. And then I'm putting my pins on the other side. And now I'm ready to carry it over to the sewing machine to sew 1/4 inch on either side of my line. Okay, and now we're ready to sew on our flying geese. And if you've only penned on one side of it, your fabric can still turn. So make sure you're using 2 pens or watch it at the end. So let's go ahead and make sure all of our blocks have 2 pens, and that way they do not move. I feel wobbly on this one, but I'm watching it through a camera. And beautiful. I'm going to do 3 or 4 of these, and then we'll turn it around and come back on the opposite side. So we've sewn 3. I'm going to pick up the foot, bring my blocks, drop them into my lap, turn them around, pull out just a tiny bit of thread, and then we're going to go back. Now watch your needles, they don't poke you. So for every flying geese block that I'm doing, I'm making 4 flying geese. So that means I need 1 10-inch and 4 5 1/4 inch. Now, once you have, see, I poked myself. Once you have your first row of stitches in, you can pull out your needles so you don't get poked. It's your choice when you pull them out. They're only needed there before you have the first full line on your flying geese. If your block turns over, very simple, just turn it right back over. Now, when I do a quilt, I do use a lot of pins when I'm doing different blocks like the flying geese, like the pinwheel stars. So you want to make sure you have enough pins in the house that you don't run out. I love this pin. It's sturdier. I don't sew over it. You see where I put it, but I have different pins for different uses. They're not the thin pins that you can sew over. They're not the thin pins I use for a lot of the clothing. They're nice, thick, but you see, I always like the long pens. So I think these are like 2 1/8, something like that. You can see them in my description. I'm going to link a bunch of my personal quilting things that I use in my description. And as an Amazon affiliate, some of the links in the description are affiliate links, which means I may earn a small commission at no extra cost to you. And that's because I'm an Amazon associate. I earn from qualifying purchases, and that helps support my channel and allows me to continue to bring you great quilting quality videos. And my friends, hit that comment button. I would love to hear what kind of video you would like to see, or what quilting tool you find that you use maybe more than you think others might use, and how it's beneficial. I would love to share that here on the channel. And of course, I'll give you a shout out, because those are always fun, right, my friends? Hear your name on the big screen. Well, I just hope you love sewing as much as I do. And I'm going to do a few more of these blocks, and I'll meet you back here real soon. once I have my two 5 1/4 inch sewn on across my 10-inch block, I'm just going to hit them with a hot iron, set them aside, let them cool, and then we will meet you back over at the cutting board. We're back over at the cutting board, and I'm going to cut each of these on the line that we originally drew and sewed a 1/4 inch on either side of. So take these one at a time, cut them apart, and I will meet you back at the ironing board. Point to point. If you need to, use a weight to help weight down your block. Accuracy matters, my friends, in each step of the process. Oof, come on, fingers work. All right, we're at the ironing board, and we're going to take our press pieces and press them all open so that they are open as such. And then we're going to go back over to our table, put our other block on each of these pieces, mark it, and stitch across. So just take your time pressing. It's important you get every bit of that fabric pressed up against your stitch line. Take your time and enjoy. Okay, and we have our stack pressed open, and we're going to take the top one, pull it over, and we're going to take one of our 5 1/4 inch blocks, line it up on the side, put in a pin, and then we're going to use a ruler, and we're going to go point to point and make our mark. And again, it's okay to use a permanent pin because we're going to cut on that line, remember? All right. And our first block is ready to sew. We're going to put that up, and we're going to continue our entire stack, placing our blocks, putting a pin, and we're going to use our ruler to go point to point, our pin, okay. So what do y'all want to talk about? Hit that comment button. I want to know for upcoming videos what you would like to see me make or hear me talk about, and I am happy to share. And if you've got a great tip that I can share with others, put that in the comments as well. I'd be happy to give you a shout out on an upcoming video where I share that tip or idea or suggestion with others. And I'm going to pin the rest of these, and I'll meet you at the sewing machine. Make sure you don't use a magic marker that bleeds too much. This pin is almost bleeding too much, because even though we're cutting on the line, we don't want to smudge or get that mark anywhere else on our fabric that we're not going to cut on. Okay, so we got to the end of those. We're turning it around. We can remove our pins now because we have one strip done. And we're just going to flip it around and do a 1/4 inch on the opposite side now. And we're going to chain stitch each of these. And I'm watching my bobbin thread because my bobbin thread is getting a little bit low. So we want to make sure we don't run out of bobbin thread. Just go slow, keep your fingers on it till you get to the end so that you're not twisting the fabric before you're finished. Pull your pins. Just going to keep on sewing until we get this strip done. All right, now we're going to pop them each with the iron and meet you at the cutting board. Okay, we're going to bring each one of our pressed flying geese blocks over here. We're going to cut on the line in between our 1/4 inch on each side, and we're going to set these aside. We will bring them over to the cutting board, the iron, and press them open. So we are so almost done with our flying geese. So excited. And I will see you, my friends, at the ironing board. And we are pressing our beautiful flying geese with our hot steam iron. So we're laying them down and just pressing it back. And we're laying it down and just pressing it back. We'll move these out of the way, start the next. And I don't want to iron more than about 3 before I move these pieces out of the way. And before I move them too much, I want them to dry so they don't wrinkle or crease or anything else after the hot steam iron. Beautiful, beautiful fabric. I love this. I am thinking this is almost going to look elegant on a quilt. What do you think? All right, and we are on the Singer Heavy Duty, and we're putting together our half square triangle blocks into a pinwheel of sorts. And we're matching our seams, making sure that they're laying comfortably together, feeling them so they don't have too much bulk, matching our seams and sewing our 1/4 inch seam. Now on this Singer Heavy Duty sewing machine, it does have a lot of different stitches it can use, but I like using this machine because it is heavy duty and it can do the larger projects as well. And I'm going to be upcoming quilt, letting you know ahead of time, we are going to make a rug instead of a quilt. This, of course, is a quilt, and we're going to make many, 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 many more quilts. But I want to show you a rug. Haven't done one in a long, long time, and I am way overdue for doing a fabric rug. So hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because I am so excited. I am going to be doing a fabric rug quilt very soon, where I'm going to use batting and jelly rolls. That's right, jelly roll quilt. Rug. And I've not laid these together before we're stitching them together. So it takes me a little minute to line them up, make sure I have my seams completely done. I'm going to hold the seam as I stitch. My feed dogs are pulling my quilting backwards, as it always does. Feed dogs are up. Now, when I get to the center spot, I want to make sure my seams lay the way they're supposed to be laying. And I go over that a little bit slower, and I continue with my 1/4 inch right there. Now, no one's perfect, so see how that is off, like a 1/16 maybe, not a 1/4, maybe an 1/8. I don't know, between an 1/8 and a 1/16 right there. And that is why we have to trim up our blocks before we go further. But I am so excited. We are getting these pieced together, and soon, don't go anywhere, because we are going to lay out all these blocks. and I'm going to show you how the quilt is going to be laid out. So I'm very, very excited. We're almost to the point where we're going to start making the focal blocks to start finishing our quilt. These spirals, if you will, these half square triangles, are really accent pieces for my quilt that I'm putting together. We're using the flying geese. And then we are going to start framing a few of our blocks so that we can have our focal blocks inside of frames. I'm so excited. And no, I'm not looking at the like the log cabin frame. I'm thinking about doing the corner frame. We're going to press all of these, and so far, my friends, I've pressed all of the seams towards the black, but now to make this as small as possible right here in the middle, one of the black needs to go to the opposite side to make it as smooth as possible, less layers in the center. So I have this marvelous detective fabric that I got from Hancock Fabrics, and it's from Moore's Creative Group QT Fabrics. So very excited about using this in a police detective's quilt. I'll be cutting this into 8.5 by 8.5 inches for my square blocks for the quilt. By QT Fabrics, I also have this 2024 Morris Creative Group police badge, which we're going to be using as well. So I'm going to open this up and cut this 8.5 by 8.5 inch squares. And I have this beautiful fabric, screen print D number 5129 Robert Kaufman, K&C Company, or K and Company, and America the Beautiful. I also have this fabric I've just pulled out of the cupboard that is musical fabric. I thought this would be beautiful on the quilt because it is for music lovers. And I'm not finding the company. There we go. High Fashion Fabrics, and it is called No Name. Okay, so High Fashion Fabrics, and then I have this beautiful stars shooting cotton fabric. I believe this is a Robert Kaufman as well, and it's only telling me it is cotton. Let's see if we can find the name right after the listing, and no name. So we're going to cut these into 8.5 inch squares as well. Okay, and I need 169 minimal 8.5 inch squares to make a quilt. So needless to say, I've got a lot of fabric I need to get started on, and all of these are going to be turned into quilt blocks. So I'm going to cut out my fabric, then I will cut out my pieces to go on the corners, and we'll show you how to do that momentarily. Okay, and now we're cutting out all of our 8.5 inch blocks that we'll be needing. And I'm just lining these up. I'm doing 2 strips at a time. Laying my ruler across, cutting off the selvage, keeping that for a scrappy project. And then I'm going to line up on my cutting board, get my 8.5 inches, line it up, and cut my blocks. Now I've opted to pull it to the side each time, line it up on all 4 lines again, and cut my 8.5 inch strips. And now I'm cutting my black grunge by Moda and my blue grunge by Moda into 4-inch strips to make my corner pieces. And I'm using my 5-inch ruler, setting it up on the 4 inches, and we're cutting it across. And I'm cutting up 1 yard of each. Okay, and now I'm going to take 2 strips at a time and cut off my selvage, going to a smaller ruler, cutting off my selvage, lining up my lines, and now I'll be cutting them into 4-inch pieces. And this will be my cornerstones to make like the snowball effect or the framing effect, dubbing the corners with this blue fabric and the black fabric. And I will meet you over at the sewing machine. Keeping all of your scraps. Grab another 2 strips and continue. Now I'm going to be taking my 8.5-inch squares and I am going to be pinning face to face my blocks, similar to what I did with the flying geese, but you can see these are much, much smaller. And we're going to be pinning them here, and I'm going to be drawing my line across and stitching, and that way I'm going to have beautiful dubbed corners. So all I want to do is really highlight this focal block. So that's what we're going to be doing with the corners. And we have both black and blue, so we need to audition the pieces to see if we want to do it in blue or if we want to do it in black. So, what do you think? Now, obviously, I'm going to make some kind of command decision up, but I'd love to hear from you. Which do you think I should do? Hit the comments. Would it have been better in black or would it have been better in blue, depending upon which way I go now? Maybe half and half? Okay, so let's get going. We're going to go ahead and use the black ones this time. Maybe I'll do half of the blocks in each. Don't know yet, but I'm going to put them on here. We're going to pin them, and then I'm going to use my small ruler to draw the line across point to point, just like we did before. So let's see how I do that. So I have my marking pencil, I have my pens, and I'm going to go ahead and pin each one of these blocks on. Line them up. They are face to face with the fabric. And I'm just kind of sliding the pen through on each of these. Make sure that's straight. Okay, it looks good. Okay, so I have a little square like with the pens. Now we're going to take our ruler point to point, and I'm kind of looking through a camera, so forgive me on that. Maybe if I do it upside down, it'd look better. But I think I'm getting that, yep, point to point. So now again, I'm laying the ruler down, point to point, holding the ruler in place and just kind of guiding that pencil gently over it to make my mark. So there I go. Now, what I'm going to be doing is I think I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch in. If I sew a 1/4 inch, okay, let's make our other marks and then we'll come back and decide. Because, hey, it's our own pattern. We can do this however we want to do it. And I might even be able to use the blocks in the same pattern, same quilt, if I make this to where I'm only using, I want to sew it, no, I want to sew it right on the line. I'm going to sew it right on the line. I was just running through my head the possibilities of using these same blocks twice instead of once. But if I sew it point to point right on the line, that makes my perfect 8.5 inch square when I'm finished. No, it doesn't. Makes me smaller. Ooh, let's bring out the pad and paper. And I'm holding the ruler or putting the ruler just slightly above my X, trying to hit that point with my line. So we're coming right down to the point, up just a tiny, tiny smidge, because we know it's not that sharp this time. So I want my measurements going directly into the points, and it's not doing it unless I have it just above that point. So now that I have that, we're going to take these that I've put pins in them and draw our marks on all of them, and then we're going to sew. And I like to mix it up. I don't like to do everything at once. I do if there's not a lot of things, but if there's a lot of things, I like to feel accomplished, so I'll do a stack at a time and just keep repeating the steps till all of them are done. So I have about, I don't know, probably about 7 or 8 of them that I'm going to mark the lines, and then I'm going to sew them so that you can see exactly what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And what I think I'm going to do is sew directly on this line and then go back and sew on a line about a 1/2 inch away. And that way, this is going to be my piece when I open it up. But this, when I cut it off a 1/4 inch after this true line, then that is going to be a finished block that I can use in another project, or maybe even enhance the border by putting these other squares in the border. So I just think that would be a really cool idea. And I'm using my scraps right away instead of having them go to the scrap bin or a future project. So, and it's easier. They're already here, so I might as well sew on this line for this piece, and then a 1/2 inch away, I'll sew, cut on the quarter in between the two sew lines, and have a full small block that I can put in a border, because it'll end up about that size. What do you think? I think that's beautiful. Hit that comment button. Let me know your thoughts. Is that how you do your blocks? Or have you ever thought about doing that? And it just takes a little bit more time to make that second stitch line. It would take more time if I cut it off and then had to rematch them, re-pin them, and go from there. So I'm kind of excited about that idea. And while I'm doing this, kind of thinking in my head, I know I want the thin blue line as my border, but maybe is there a place in my quilt where I can use these blocks? Since they're all the same colors, it only makes sense that if I could use it in this block, I go ahead and do it. And yes, I could be using one of my clear quilting rulers to do this, but it doesn't matter. You just need a straight edge that's longer than your corner to corner that you're doing. So usually I do this standing up at the cutting board, but you know, switching it up, maybe even setting up a kitchen timer. Buy yourself a timer, set it up at your sewing machine, and make sure you're not sitting for, say, more than 30 minutes without getting up and walking, or standing and cutting or pressing for more than 15 minutes without standing, walking around, moving, changing your venue. So I'll sit for about 30 minutes, get up, iron, cut, and then come back to the sewing table. That way I'm not spending, 6 hours at the sewing machine. I'm doing a lot of stuff in between, which sewing necessitates, but when you're making a king-size quilt, sometimes, my friends, making a king-size quilt, you're sitting at that sewing machine a long time if you've done all this other work ahead of time. So just mixing it up, exercising your legs, walk outside, walk around your deck, walk around your porch, smell a flower, look for a flower, find a butterfly, find a beetle, a lizard, and just stare at it a second, come back in and continue your project. It's nice to mix up nature when we can with our everyday tasks inside. And you don't want to find that an entire day has gone by and you haven't seen the sunshine. If the sun is shining, my friends, it's nice to see the sun. And if it's raining, just take a minute to enjoy the pitter-patter on the roof, the deck, the porch, whatever you have, and enjoy the sounds of nature, the looks, the smells, the freshness that nature affords you. And yes, even if you live in a cement jungle, even if you're in the city, my friends, there's beauty to be had outside. Maybe it's the kids' laughter next door playing a game. Maybe it's the sound of the different cars. And maybe you like that or you don't like that. And one pin, you've got to make sure it stays put. 2 pins are going to hold your pieces perfectly. 1 pin, they're still going to move on you. So when you start to sew, you still got to make sure that they're where they should be on the fabric. Okay, so I think we've got enough with lines on it. Let's go ahead and sew these pieces so you can see again how I turn them around and I do all of one block, meaning this, before I go on to the next block in my sewing machine. And make sure you have enough bobbin thread and top thread in your machine before we start. I'll usually have a couple of wound bobbins before I start, but again, winding them during a project, there's no harm in that because it gives me, you know, that other activity to do. Okay, so we are sewing directly on the line, so we want to make sure that we line up, and we're going to bring it right under the foot where that line starts, and we're going to sew directly through that line and off the fabric. And then we're going to pick up our foot, pull it around to the next piece, make sure we're aligned right on that edge, and we're going to put that line right under the foot up to the needle, and then we're going to hold the end over here and we're going to sew straight across. And I'm going to sew off the fabric, pick up my foot, twist it around, straighten this one again, put the line right under the needle, hold the back of it, make sure I'm straight. Let's cut the previous block off because the previous block is giving it too much weight and torque. But you can see how I sewed that. And then before we're done, before I cut them, I told you I was going to half inch away, I'm going to sew that so that we have an extra block for our scraps instead of just 2 triangles. Okay, so let's go ahead and sew this one across. And I'm going to hold it. Now, all the way through, you want to keep your fingers on it, go off of the block, lift your foot, twist it around to the next block, give yourself a little more thread if needed, and then we're going to sew this straight across. All right, what did I do? I think I broke my thread. Yep, I broke my thread. But you see how we're able to do all 4 pieces. I'll have to finish this one up because who knows what happened, my thread broke. But I have the block looking like so. Now, once I'm at this point, I can pull out the pins. So if I wanted to pull out the pins, I can go ahead and do that because they don't really have a purpose at this point because I'm already sewed it. I've kept it in line, and because I've stitched it as such, I can release the threads on the sides that I've chain stitched between it, so it's not holding it or bulky. And now you see how beautiful this block is going to be when I open it up. Isn't that neat? Woohoo! All right, so let's put more thread back through the needle and finish this last block because, again, it didn't get finished. Once you've rethread your needle, go back about an inch or at least a half inch. So right on top of those stitches that you previously did, and bring it forward off the fabric. Now, it's really important you keep right on the edge of that 8.5 inch block. Because if you're not right on the edge of that 8.5 inch block, your final blocks are not going to be 8.5 inches. You're going to have to trim it to fit. And we don't want to trim it to fit. We want it to be perfect every time. I'm going to cut the previous block off. And we have it finished. Yay! Looks like I started on the wrong side on this one. And see, that pin is not going to hold it completely. So you have it relatively in the right spot, and you've got to readjust every time to make sure that it hasn't gone too far from where you need it to be. And we're making the snowball block. like lifting the foot, putting the fabric right up to the needle and starting. We have our first block done. We've sewn off the edge. We're starting our second block. It's lined up. Now we're going to trim our previous block off, set it aside, lift the foot, twist it around, and continue doing our snowball block. Lift the foot, turn it around, do our snowball block. Done with that one, picking up the next. Lift the foot, put it right up to our needle. Turn off our previous block. And we're done with another block. And I'm going to keep doing this for the remaining blocks. Just make sure you're realigning them every time you bring them up to the needle. And if this is causing you too much trouble, my friends, before you start, you can go ahead and put a second needle over here, and that's going to keep the blocks down. So now you have your snowball here that you've sewn an extra line 1/2 inch away from your snowball line. And we're going to take our ruler and our rotary blade. We're going to set it at 1/4 inch, and we're going to trim right at the 1/4 inch on each of these rows. Okay, so now we have 4 triangles over here, and we have 1 snowball here. So now we're going to go to the ironing board, and we're going to press these all open. Take your hot iron set on hot cotton setting, because we're using quilters cotton, 100% cotton. And we're just going to press these triangles open. Sounds like I need to put a little more water in it. And if you've sewn it perfectly, you will have a perfect 8.5 inch square. Now I'm using 4 inches and 8.5 inches because I didn't want it covering up the entire pattern, because instead of a snowball that usually goes half, so what I would use on this is 4 3/4. If I wanted it to close in the sides, I use 4 3/4. But once it's sewn over to the other piece, it's going to look like this, which I felt it would look more like a frame and show off the fabric more than it would showing off just the colored blocks. So again, if you want your snowball to be completely covered, you're using 8.5-inch blocks. You're going to use a 4 3/4. So now I'm going to take it, pinch open my black side, and I'm going to press it back. So turn them all over to the black, pinch the black side, and just press it over. Pinch the black side and press it over. Pinch the black side and press it over. Okay, and now we trim these up to a perfect square, and we can use them in a border or anywhere else that we want to use, in any design that we want to use. However, we want to put these half square triangles together. So we can turn them all in to mini pinwheels if we choose. Oopsie, what do I got it wrong for? There we go. Silly me. What am I doing? There we go. Then we got a miniature pinwheel. Pretty cool, huh? And we go ahead and trim our blocks up. I'm using a 10-inch ruler, and I'm just going to set this on here to where I am lined up and trim off the outside. Okay, and now we have a perfect square block. And we bring these little babies over. Now, these rulers are awesome because they have the lines on them. So you can line up your cuts and have a perfect 3.5-inch block. And since I don't know where I'm going to use these in this quilt, I'm not going to trim the rest of the little guys now. I'm going to put them in a pile and come back and do them. But not too much waste on my blocks. So how do you make a snowball block? Well, we're going to make a variation of the snowball block today. And I'm going to take a 8.5 block of fabric, and I'm going to take 4 inches. Now I'm going to take 4-inch blocks because I don't want to cover up the entire edge of my 8.5-inch block. I want some of the sides to show. So if I want them to show, I'm going to cut it down to a smaller size. We're using the 4-inch by 4-inch on the 8.5 by 8.5 inch. But if I wanted to cover this, I would use 4 3/4 inch. And that way the sides would even have the black on it as well when we opened it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin 4 blocks all around my, oopsie, stabbed myself. And we are going to, and again, this is a variation of the snowball block because I'm letting some of my edges show instead of covering all of the edges up. That one didn't go straight. There we go. And just making sure we line up on the side and the corner. And then we're pinning that into place. And we didn't put the second pin out there because I actually need to use my ruler. So take any straight edge that is longer than the block is catty corner to catty corner. We're going to lay that down. If I had a sharp point, I'd go right on point to point. This is kind of a dull point, so I'm back a little bit, and we're going to mark it point to point here. Turn it, make sure that's straight on corner to corner, and we're going to mark our triangle corner to corner. Oopsie. Hold it down with a ruler and go to the next one, and we're going to measure our corner to corner. And measure our corner to corner. Now, once we have this done, we are going to sew directly on, that's wrong. We're going to sew directly on this line. So we're going to move aside those. We can, to hold it perfectly in the corner, throw in another pin on all four sides if we choose. And then we come over to the sewing machine. We're going to sew directly on this line. So I put the first corner right up under the foot, and I'm going to hold the back side here. So I'm right on the edge of my fabric. We're going to stitch across that line, going off of the fabric, picking up the foot, turning the fabric, putting it right on the corner up to that needle. Make sure this is still on the edge, and we're going to sew across. And we're going to lift up the foot after we've sewn off the fabric. Put the next corner underneath, sew across. Pick up the next corner, sew across. Now, we have now done all four sides of our variation of the snowball block. But I don't want to cut these off a 1/4 inch after the thread and just throw them down into the scrap bin. I want to go ahead now and pick up my needle, and I'm going to go around a second time. So I'm going to line myself up with my measuring right on the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew a 1/2 inch away from that line. Off the fabric, pick up your foot, turn it, go back to the next one, line yourself up with the lines for a 1/2 inch, and we're going to sew across. And I'm going to do that for each of my lines, and then I'm going to pull my pins out. So now I have my perfect piece, and this is going to be a little half-star triangle or half square triangle that I can put somewhere in the border or somewhere else on the quilt if I can. Otherwise, it's ready for the next project. So let's go on over to the ironing board, open up our snowball, and press it flat. And we're using our rotary blade and our ruler to cut our corners off. And then we have a stack, and I'll meet you at the ironing board. We are back at the cutting board. Now, once I have my, this one shows up better. Once I have my 2 rows of stitches that I'm going to cut in between, I bring it over to the ironing board because I want to lock in my stitches. And I have it on the cotton hottest setting, because we're using the quilters cotton fabric. I will stop saying that eventually, but I want you to know it. It's very important to know. And that kind of locks in our stitches, and then I set them aside and I keep ironing the entire pile. Again, we're locking in our stitches. That helps our stitches want to become one with the fabric that we've just stitched through. Ideally, if you can let your bigger pieces completely cool before you move them, you run less chances of it wrinkling, because when it's hot and moist, has a tendency to wrinkle if you end up folding a corner or otherwise not having it lay perfectly flat. Once it cools, it's less likely to hold that crease. All right, so we're almost done with this stack, and I'm going to show you what happens after we have cut halfway in between this 1/2 inch strip of seams here. All right, let's throw these aside and start having fun, shall we? Okay, so on this stack, I've already trimmed it, and we're going to just put the iron under one flap at a time. We're going to press those flaps open. Careful not to burn yourself. And there we have our beautiful snowball effect. And yes, 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 I know most snowballs are going to cover up completely on the edges. I wanted my focal block to show more, so I opted to just dub off the corners. All right, so let's go ahead, throw that aside, and do another one. And it sounds like I'm not getting much steam out of that, so let me fill it back up with water. Steam makes your ironing faster. So if you want to have fun, get it done real quick, solid, beautiful edges, make sure your iron has water in it. And do use distilled water, because that's going to prevent the little flakies that come out of the iron sometimes. Okay, so I'm trying to get a feel for what I'm doing, and I've thrown some of the blocks around. I think instead of having rows of the pinwheels, I'm going to spread them out amongst the snowball blocks. Still not sure what I'm going to do with flying geese in the center, but I'm getting a better feel for, I like it more mixed up than it was solids. What do you think? Do you like it more mixed up than it was solids? I'm feeling better about it with it not being rows and rows of identical blocks. All right, back to the sewing machine. When you're making your snowball quilt blocks, my friends, instead of wasting the corners, go ahead and sew a line a 1/2 inch away from your first sew that's going to be for your real block, and make little pinwheel or 1/2 star triangle blocks with your scraps. The right tools for your quilting project could be more than just a ruler and a rotary blade. Having a cutting mat that actually turns is a blessing when you need to cut off corners. All right, so I'm still in the process of creating my blocks, but I didn't like the layout, so I've picked them all up, put them into their piles, and now I'm going to do a quick layout, see what I like, what I want to change, how I might go from here. All right, so I want to give you a quick peek on relaying out these blocks, what they look like without the flying geese. I think the flying geese is going to be a border on both sides. And right now I have them laid out to be 7 by 9 blocks. And my blocks are 8.5 inches. So just trying to get an idea of what kind of pattern, if any pattern, we're looking at. And back to the sewing machine. So I want to show you what we're doing. We're pinning our rows together so that I can do them in order and not get miscalculated and put the wrong block with the wrong block. Because look, if you look at the block, they're all uniform. All of the blocks we've done are now laid out, minus the center block. That's going to be a special block I still have to create. But all the other blocks are laid out. We're putting them together. And look, we have the bottom 2 rows done. There's only 11 rows, so there is no row 1. But we have our blocks all laid out. I'm so excited about it. With the flying geese on both sides, it's going to equal out very nice. And then we're going to do 3 or 4 borders. I'm so excited. This is turning out to be really pretty, and this is going to be a lovable, huggable, beautiful music quilt for a beautiful couple that is a police officer and a dentist, forensic dentist, and a detective. So I'm so excited. I'm so happy for the 2 of them, and this is going to be beautiful. And I am sewing my blocks together, sewing my rows together. So I'm very excited about the progress of this quilt. Whoopsie. And I have my blocks pinned together where they need to be. So as I go down a row, I'm unpinning, realigning, and stitching it together. And my feed dogs are pulling it along as I go. And it looks like some of these blocks did not make it over to the cutting board to be perfectly trimmed up. Sad me. Every time in between blocks you want to trim, you want to press, and that's going to make the entire project go so much more smooth for you. And I'm chain stitching these together, so I'm just going to unstitch them as I go, meaning pop the thread on my thread cutter here on the side of the machine. I am using my Singer heavy duty sewing machine, and this one was not trimmed either. Sad, sad. And I'm working on row 12. Of course, there is no row 1, as I mentioned before. And we are pressing our flying geese. We're pressing them all the same direction. We're using a hot steam iron so it goes quickly. And we really just have the one main seam because all the other seams are already going up. And I'm going to do this for both rows. Okay, so I have my next rows in front of me. So this is the next row I'm going to do. I've already done 10, 11, and 12. And after row 9, we'll do 8. We'll do 7. We'll go back to the ironing board and keep on going. All right, so we have our thread in the machine, and we're going to pick up our first pieces. And we have them pinned. We're going to rematch them together, line up our seams. and stitch them through. I'm going to make sure my seams go the right direction as we get to them. And then I'm going to pick up a place further on down the line, maybe even the end here. Pull my pen, put it on the magnet I have on my desk. I do have a magnet on the desk because I keep knocking over the pen magnet and the pen cushion no matter what I try. So I did put a magnet on the desk and glued it down with that sticky stuff it came with. Kind of like the magnets you get for the back of a business card. And I just put my pins on that, and that works out to be a great holder for when I am in between my pens being functional and putting them back in the pen cushion or magnet that I keep them on. All right, let's go with another one. Oops, that doesn't look right. Our 1/4 inch straight across. And keep going down the row. Last two on this row. And we grab the next row. Now, when we're looking at rows and they're pinned together like so, I like doing the first one and maybe the last one or close to the last one, because that way you've got a lot of space in between. And then I get closer and closer, cut my threads, and do some more together. So it's no real rhyme or reason how you put them together. It's just how they lay out and what works for you. Blocks out, and so. And now we'll take from the opposite end, or close to it, and sew them together. So we're going to pull out our pin, we're going to realign them, match them together, and sew through them. And we know we want this seam going up and this seam going down, so we're going to pay attention to make sure that happens. Collect 2 more and continue. And we are getting closer to being done. I am so excited about this. We have all of our rows laid out, and we just have 3 parts now to combine, and then we start with our borders. Yay! And when you're sewing, my friends, you want to have the bulk of the weight distributed up on a table so you're not pulling or torquing as you stitch. If you're not using pins, you need to be very, very careful. All your seams are lining up. When you get to the end or close to it, pick up the bulk of your quilt, put it back up on the table so it's not pulling too heavily to torque your stitches. And we have our iron on the hot cotton setting, and we're going to press down all of our rows seams. Make sure everything is nice and crisp before we go on to the next step. And we're sewing the last 2 halves of the quilt together. This is where you should be using pins. And what I'm doing is I'm matching my seams, making sure they're going in the right direction. I'm going to stop right at the seam with my needle in the down position, and I'm going to straighten up the next part of my quilt, making sure that it is laying out in my lap and on the table to where it's not creating a pulling or torquing situation. I'm going to lay up my next two seams, hold them with my fingers, not let go. Make sure everything is smooth and lined up. We're going to stitch our 1/4 inch. Now, I'm going to stop right in that seam area with my needle in the down position, line up the next two seams, and readjust the bulk of the quilt and continue. We're dealing with a lot of quilt and a lot of weight, so we want to make sure everything is lining up just perfect without anything pulling to torque the fabric. And you can reach your hand underneath to make sure your edges are right on top of each other and smooth, meeting at the ends. Now, we're coming up on a seam that bothers me. Now, why would a seam bother me? Well, if it's too bulky and too thick right on top of one another. So I'm going to go ahead and take my triangle and snap it off, get rid of some of the bulk that should have been done prior to this step, but we are a-okay. Readjust your quilt as you go. Make sure your neck seam is all in order. Needle down, pull the pieces underneath to help line them up. Now, pull it back up on the table so we're not having too much pulling and torquing. See how I open my seam to allow it not to be so much on top of each other. Don't let go of your corner till you get there. You want that continuing straight in your 1/4 inch. Okay, now I have the body of my quilt completed. Now I need to do my borders. Right, and I am going to use black as one of my borders, if not two. So I'm going to go ahead and combine all of these. I need 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 strips with the fabric to go around my quilt currently, as its current size. So I am combining these in like the triangle motion. I am putting them together, putting the selvage just off the side, and then I'm sewing point to point with them laying in an X, if you will. I've changed my thread. I left the gray in the bottom, but I moved the top to a dark blue, extremely dark blue. So I'm hoping that will be fine. And once I sew all these together, I'm going to sew my blue strips together. So, and then I'm going to put my blue with my black to go around the quilt. And then remember we did the flying geese. The flying geese are going to go on two sides. And then we're going to put the black and blue border around again. Okay, so let me get these strips done and I'll be right back with you. We'll do the blue and then we'll put these two together and then put them on the quilt. I'm so excited. And now we're going to take our blue 4-inch border and our 1.5-inch black border and we're going to put them together. So we are sewing just a straight line this whole distance. So we're just making sure we're right on that line. Sewing our entire border of this stage together. Right, so now we are pressing our seams on our border. So we want to make sure that our border piece is perfectly flat. Now, one thing great about this, if you can get an ironing board with lines, you can actually line up your lines to make sure that you're making your fabric perfectly straight. So that's another really cool perk if you can find an ironing board pad that is like this. I'm gonna do a search and I'll put one in the description if I can find one. And as an Amazon affiliate, I do earn a small commission for any qualified purchases that you might make from the links in my description. That only helps my channel and makes me very grateful so I can keep on bringing you great, valuable videos. Okay, now I'm going to add the border to both sides. So we have the sides here, and I am going to have them face down as, oh, I'm so sorry, crazy me. I am going to have them face down as I add my borders. All the borders, put the quilt top back up on the table so it's not pulling and torquing. Lock my needle in so it's in the down position. Then we are simply going to put the border on. Keeping our seams in the direction that they've been pressed. Keeping us right on the edge. adjusting as we go. So we're adding on, we have our 2 borders here, and now we're going to add our flying geese. So let's go over to the cutting board, trim up our flying geese. So we're going to add that to both sides. All right, so now we're going to trim up our flying geese as they are a little bit out of size. So we're just going to skimmy that off, which works out to be about that much of a mess. All right, so now it is time to add our flying geese. Let me put my needle down. Flying geese onto our quilt. So since I have the least amount of seams in the quilt with the borders on the sides here, I'm going to put, I'm going to put that down. Well, I've already started with it up. So we're going to make sure all of these flying geese seams go in the same direction. So it'll be easier to press once I'm done with this. And we're just going to zip this on both long sides of the quilt. So it is a large quilt. We are making the king size quilt, so you've got a lot of bulk to maneuver as you sew. Gonna have the flying geese straight down and the quilt half in my lap, half on the table. And we're going to stitch this onto both sides of the quilt, and then we are going to press it. Then go ahead and cut. I really like the black next to the flying geese, so I'm thinking about, instead of just blue on the outside, I'm going to do a thin strip, the 1.5 inch strip of the black, and then add a smaller piece of blue, because our measurements right now are, I think it was 86 or 87 by 100. So I don't want to, with the 8.5 inch on both sides, I don't want to make the sides go over my 108, because my batting is 108 by 120. I need to keep this a maximum of 106 by like 110, 112. So I need to keep in mind the measurements of my, well, actually it's my backing. Ooh, my backing is 108 by, I think I got 4 yards, so it's plenty of time. So there's a lot of thought that goes into this, because I can't make, I need ideally an extra 4 inches outside of my quilt for the pinning and maneuvering on the long arm quilting machine. So, so I got to think a moment. We're going to remeasure as soon as I get the flying geese on both sides, and then calculate out what I want. I may cut the blue 1.5 inches to match my black 1.5 inches. And then get out my bolt of black fabric to do a black binding, I think. What are your thoughts? What do you think would look best? I think the black on both sides would really complement and finish up the flying geese very, very nice, but I wanted larger than a 1.5-inch border on the outside. Although, again, it is not necessary. It is not necessary. It's just for looks and balance. So let me finish up this side. I've got another 3+ feet to go, 3.5, maybe 4 feet to go. And then we will do the other side. We'll measure, we'll iron, and come right back to you. Hey, and hit that comment button. If you want me to show you the entire process, I would love to do that, but I want to be respectful of your time because it does take a lot of time to do a quilt. So hit that comment button. Let me know if you want to see the entire process or if you're happy with just seeing the techniques. If you want more sewing, less sewing, what do you want to see? I need to know. Okay, so I have the one side done. So I have my blocks, the top of my quilt, the first 2 borders. I have the borders of the flying geese. And now what I was talking about is the border over here. I think I need the black to help complement and close in my flying geese. I think the black goes beautiful with this tone. And someone was asking me what color this is. My friends, I've got to go on the Paducah website and find out for Hancocks of Paducah. So they are online. I did get this Moda Grunge from Hancocks of Paducah. So that is probably right there available to order, but you're going to see the different shades. The shades you want, it has a touch of orange in it. It's just absolutely gorgeous. I love this, but I have used it all, so I do not have the name, and I meant to go on the website last night to check and I forgot. So here we go with the blue, the black, and the beautiful. So I think I'm going to do a thin row of black out here. Now I could do a larger row of black, but I really think the blue, since the bulk of the inside is the blues and the grays, but this border of my 4 inches and the 1.5 inches would make this too wide for my 108 backing fabric. So my batting is big enough. That's fine. It's my backing fabric that I've got to keep to the 106 on the top to make everything go smoothly. So I think I'm going to cut a 1.5-inch strip of this blue and just finish it up with a 1.5 and the 1.5 out here on the outside, and then maybe the black 2.5 inch to fold over for my binding at the very binding at the very end. So these are borders, and so I'm going to do a black, a blue border, and then black binding is what I'm looking at. Okay, so I'm adding my 1.5-inch strip onto my gold flying geese on the edge. Now my seams are going up, so I'm making sure that they're laying the same direction as I go, which makes it a little bit harder, but trying to hold a 1.5-inch strip on the underneath is difficult. So I'm just watching each seam, making sure each seam is going up. I'm laying it against the sewing machine as I stitch. And I'm going to put this black strip on both sides of the quilt from top to bottom. And we've trimmed out all of our 2-inch blue strips, and now we are sewing them together. And that will be our final border around our quilt. Now it's time to put our blue border, our final border, all the way around our king size quilt. So what blocks have we learned to make during this quilt? Well, we've learned how to make the flying geese. We've learned how to make the snowball block. And we have learned how to make our half square triangle star block. And we've used all of those in this quilt. So it has been fun for me. I hope that you are enjoying it as well. And remember, borders are important around a quilt so you have less seams that you worry about unpulling during the long arming process or the final quilting process, where you're combining the top of the quilt, which we've just made, with the batting in the center and the backing. And then, of course, we finish all that with the binding. So I'm going to go on all 4 sides with this. I like to do the 2 sides, and then I like to do the bottom and the top. And that way you have less seams going across the top, or at least that's my my judgment of it. And you also cap the corners. Okay, so I'm going to go around all 4 sides, and I will meet you at the ironing board for our final press. And then the full quilt reveal. So exciting. Yay! I love that look. So what do you think of the music notes? I think that's really cool. And it has a classical feel to it, and yet you've got the trumpets, you've got the saxophones, you have the real jazz mixed in with it. So it's a real great overall musical, jazzy feel to it to me. Top and bottom, and we're done. After we finish this little bit, well, I said little bit. Okay, we got a lot of bit still left on the side here. And now, my friends, we have to go over the entire quilt and press it before we can fluff it out and reveal the entire quilt to show you. And then our quilt top is done, and the next thing we'll do is quilt the 3 pieces together: the top, which this is, the batting, and the backing. So I'm going to lay it out on the bed and show you. Now this is a king size quilt, my friends, so it does lap over on both sides of the bed because we are looking at, this is a full size and our quilt is a king size. So if you see down at the bottom, we have the border on. We have a border on all sides. Still have a couple of strings. They always seem to reappear. But I wanted to show you how absolutely lovely this quilt has turned out with my flying geese borders on the sides. And I think I am very, 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 very pleased with how this turned out. And I hope you think the same. And we have the borders on the bottom going up to our beautiful quilt. Let's grab a look at the sides. Again, this is a king size quilt. And it's hard to get a full view in one little take here. But I'm loving it. So thanks for joining me today, my friends, as we made this wonderful king size quilt for a lovely couple that I hope they really, really love it. Because again, quilting is fun. Everyone should quilt. Laying out a king-size quilt and seeing the sides, seeing the top and seeing the bottom at the same time is no easy feat. So forgive my kitchen as I lay this out, and I hope you've enjoyed making this quilt with me today, because together we created a beautiful king-size quilt filled with movement, color, and personality for a very special newlywed couple. Along the way, we made the flying geese blocks, snowball quilt blocks, and pinwheel quilt blocks. Then we brought everything together with borders in a beautiful finishing design, and I really think it frames this quilt perfectly. One of my favorite things about quilting is knowing that every stitch tells part of a story, and this quilt will hopefully become part of their new life together for many years to come. Thank you so much, my friends, for spending time quilting with me today. If you enjoyed this project, please be sure to like, subscribe to the channel, and share the comments. What kind of quilt would you like me to make next? Until next time, happy quilting and keep creating something beautiful.